Well, today I think I should address the theory that's been circulating somewhat amongst, I wouldn't say, the far left or center left, but the activist left, the politically engaged left, and that is the idea that Trump is plotting some sort of coup, which is not an idea that I think it's not like 100% bonkers, but at the same time, I still think that it is not in line with reality. And to me, I think that this claim should be addressed in the same breath as the potential escalation in tensions between the U.S. and Iran since Election Day. I think that, to me, war in Iran and a coup at home would kind of go hand in hand. But luckily, I don't think that either of those things are on the horizon. So first, I think I should get into what I perceive to be the case for the coup, for the coming coup. And from what I've seen, I think people are connecting dots, which are real dots. They're not making, they're making things totally up. And that is that, since election night, Trump has pretty much, said he won. He's trying to delegitimize the potential victory of Joe Biden. He wants people to, be certain that he won. That's the first point, which is a true thing. That is something that Trump has been trying to do. Now, some people might say that that's because, well, there were election irregularities, and Trump feels like he would have won if there was a fair election. But the other perspective is that, this is all just a cover to try and, because, no matter what, if Trump lost, he was going to say it wasn't fair. And so your pre-existing ideas about Trump, who he is, that's going to inform how you interpret his actions since the day of the election, his words and things. And while I happen to think that Trump's claims about, the lack of election integrity have merit, I also completely understand why many folks on the left who either out of willful ignorance or just honest disagreement, don't agree that there was any problems with the way this election was carried out. I don't think that it is unreasonable for them to just see what Trump is doing as sour grapes. I do, however, think it is a bridge too far to take all of this and say that, well, what he's doing is trying to essentially build support for an impending coup, so that if Trump, after the election and all that, and leading up to Inauguration Day, just decides to declare that, no, actually he won the election, and so therefore he's not leaving office, and he's going to, remain in control and just say, nope, we're not passing on power. There's going to be no transition of power to a Biden administration. And at that point, the coup would essentially be complete, because Trump is already, the president of the United States. All he would have to do is just remain the president of the United States, and that would be, in effect, a coup. So that is sort of that's the propaganda side of it. Delegitimize, a Biden win, and legitimize, the idea of Trump remaining president. That's supposed to be, some evidence that there's a coming coup. Now, the second thing is the shakeup at the Pentagon. Right after the election, there was a big purge at the Pentagon, and, supposed Trump loyalists were installed. Now, the reason why I said that this theory is sort of being purported by the activist left and not necessarily the far left is that far leftists probably welcomed a purging of high-level Pentagon staff, because far leftists understand that anyone who, got to be high-level Pentagon staff as a result of, just that being their career path is probably a horrible person who should not have that job. The last people who should get high-level jobs at the Pentagon are people who would be considered well qualified for the position. And so therefore, almost anyone other than those people, whether they be Trump loyalists or not, would be better suited to those positions if you're a lover of peace. And those of us who are on the anti-war side, I think pretty obviously look at this move and say, oh, since Trump is not going to, doesn't plan on being in office come January 20th, he's going to try and do at least something to make good on his process of bringing the troops home, because he knows that he doesn't have another 4 years to continue to kick the can down the road. And he realizes, oh darn, I've just squandered the last 4 years, and now I need to do something. I need to make good on my promises. I can't just, procrastinate anymore. And so he's like, hey, McGregor, Colonel McGregor, get in there and bring the boys home. That's the way I understand it. That's the way that I have, that it's been reported by people who I think are reliable and have good connections to the people who have been, installed by Trump at the Pentagon. But I can understand why the activist left would look at this and go, oh my gosh, Trump purged the Pentagon. He's obviously plotting a coup. He wants to get rid of the, the establishment or, let's say, impartial and patriotic public servants who lead the Pentagon and believe in the Constitution, and replace them with people who are only loyal to Trump. Because that way, when Trump, stages his coup and declares, I'm president for life or whatever, these Pentagon officials will back him. I can totally see how someone comes to that conclusion. I don't think that that is, 100% out of this world crazy. I just think that it is not the correct interpretation. I don't think that that is where we are at in reality. I think that it is, I think that you have to be a little tone deaf to think that that's where we're at in America. Our political climate just isn't suited to something like that. But, agree or disagree, these seem to be the two main indicators of the coming coup. This seems to be, to me, the core of the theory, is that, stage one, Trump delegitimizes the election, publicly, and makes it clear that Biden didn't win. And two, behind the scenes, he's putting his chess pieces in place so that he can, declare martial law like Michael Flynn is saying, which, again, I think is absolutely insane, whether you're on the left or the right. That's not happening. And you know what? If I'm wrong, we've got, I'm pretty comfortable saying that. We've got, a few weeks in which that would have to occur, but Trump's not declaring martial law. I mean, if he's going to stay in office, it's going to be through the courts. I've said, or through the state legislatures, some official legal means. I don't think that Trump is going to take any extra constitutional measures or something like that. I've never gone that far since Election Day, and I maintain that. It's one thing to try and delegitimize your opponent, but it's another thing to try and seize power yourself when you know that if you succeed, you will be seen as even more illegitimate, and therefore will be even more feckless and powerless. And so you're much better off, if I were Trump, doing everything I can to stay in office legally, but making sure that, to burn the bridges as I'm being pushed out of the city. You're much better off weakening your opponent and taking, a position of power on the outside of government, being the de facto leader of the opposition, while at the same time, the supposed person in power, if it comes to it, Joe Biden, is unable to do almost anything because half the country doesn't think that he really is the president, which again is the position to, I think, a lesser extent, but similarly, that Trump has found himself in the last 4 years. Except in Trump's case, it was a matter of personal animus rather than, I think, a genuine concern with how the election was carried out. I think that when it came to the Russiagate stuff, that was a product of people not liking Trump and believing, anything they could that explained how he could have come into office. Whereas with the, with the election questions that have come up this year, I think are very genuine. And again, I'm not someone who has been a fan of Trump. I was not a fan of his in 2016. And again, early on with the Russiagate stuff, I said, you know what? We'll give it some time. and see if anything comes of this. And eventually, nothing came of it, and it became clear that there was total BS. And I gave a lot more latitude to the RussiaGate stuff at the time than I've had to with this election stuff, because I mean, the proof is coming forward very quickly when it comes to the election this time around, and that in and of itself, to me, lends less credence to this theory that, well, the only reason why Trump is doing this is because he's plotting a coup. The fact that there seems to be some there, that there's some real meat to these accusations that Trump is making, to me, it means that these could be very, genuine concerns on his part, and not just that he's trying to poison the well so that he can somehow stage a coup later. If, in fact, let's say, for example, this is an alternate universe where there was absolutely no breach in election protocol, there was no problems with signature match verification, or with observers not being given the right to meaningful observation. Let's throw all that out and say that the only problems with the election was or not even problems, but the only complaints about the election was this whole idea of, Dominions doing the vote switching with the algorithm and stuff, which I think is probably not true. If that was all there was, and Trump was hammering home every day, Dominion switched my votes, blah, 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 that to me is, that's a pretty similar thing to Rushgate. If he was just doing that and there was really no chance that, he could prove that the election was somehow manipulated and tampered with in a way that meaningfully impacted it, and that, Biden was going to be president either way, I could lend a little more credence to the theory that, well, why else, an explanation for that could be that he's plotting some kind of coup thing. I would still think that the coup is probably unlikely, but I could at least entertain that a bit, because it'd be like, because Trump would otherwise, it would seem crazy. There have to be some way to rationalize his actions in that case, if he's just spouting nonsense constantly about how the election was stolen from him, and there's, no real, there would be no real remedy. But given that I think that there is some merit to the accusations that there were of election impropriety, I can take his concerns somewhat at face value. Now, moving on to the shakeup in the Pentagon, this to me, as I said earlier, is most likely explained by Trump kind of having an oh darn moment and saying, gee, I didn't accomplish anything that I set out to do. When I became president 4 years ago, I spent way too much time palling around with John Bolton and H.R. McMaster and these establishment hacks. And so now I need to actually put good people in here who will try and bring the troops home. And we actually are hearing some great progress on this sort of thing, with Somalia and hopefully other places. But I mean, Somalia is a terrible war that most Americans have no idea ever started. It was started, I believe, maybe by Bill Clinton, maybe by H.W., but I think Bill Clinton is when it really heated up. I mean, the American war in Somalia is the reason why Ilhan Omar is here. So, I mean, if you don't like her, blame Bill Clinton, blame George W. Bush, blame Barack Obama, and blame, up until now, Donald Trump. But now, if you don't want any more Ilhan Omars in this country, if you really don't like her, you should thank Trump and thank Douglas McGregor for, almost ending the war in Somalia. I'm sure that JSOC will find a way to keep it going forever. But if Trump and McGregor are able to chip away at it a little bit, that's a win for humanity. And so this is a roundabout way of me saying that I think the reason why Trump purged the Pentagon is actually for humanitarian reasons. It's not so he can stage a coup. Because the thing is that just by purging top Pentagon brass, that's not going to make it so that the military is loyal to Trump now. I still think that there is a tremendous institutional disadvantage for Trump when it comes to, the military. The military, as I think we've learned from from the Trump administration, they like fighting wars. I used to think that soldiers were somewhat misled, or they were just doing what their country asked them to, and in that sort of romantic idea of the American soldier, kind of like how the Vietnam guys were. Even the ones who volunteered, they didn't necessarily believe in the cause of the war or whatever. They were just, their attitude was, my country asked me to, donate my time or something like that, and I'm just trying to serve my country. My opinion over the last 4 years of the military has changed. I no longer give them the benefit of the doubt, and from what I can see, military members generally know exactly what they're doing. They understand the harm and the evil that they are inflicting upon the world, and they like it, and they don't want it to change. And so Trump putting Douglas McGregor in there, who is a good person, generally speaking, is not going to fundamentally change the military. They hate Trump, I think, for being even rhetorically anti-war. Trump has not governed as an anti-war president. Had he really been anti-war, there probably would have been a coup, like a real full coup, not like a fake Russiagate hoax attempted coup impeachment thing. I mean, like, they probably would have overthrown him for treason and tried to frame him as an actual, like, Chinese Manchurian candidate or something and hung him. Because, not just the military-industrial complex, but, well, actually, they are a part of the military-industrial complex. You're the officer class, at the very least. The officer corps, I guess, is the right term. They're monsters. Are there some good eggs in there? Sure. But they're the exception, not the rule. The Pentagon is a meat grinder, and they're always searching for more hunks of beef anywhere in the world. And they, frankly, see Trump as a threat to that, even though Trump really hasn't threatened that much. He's just taken his foot off the gas a little bit, but they're still chugging along. So, Trump having some high-level people controlling them, let's say they'll do anything they say. If those people issue orders that, hey, we're going to have some kind of, we need to go out in the streets and start setting up checkpoints and things and declare martial law and make sure that Trump remains president, the military's not going along with that. That's not going to happen. At best, you end up with some kind of Spanish Civil War situation to where there are some generals who might remain loyal to Trump and the rest, essentially go to war against him and his allied forces. But frankly, from what I've seen, I don't think that there's that there's really much of a divide in the officer corps. Or even in the general soldiers. I'm not even sure if the soldiers would mutiny or something like that and say, no, we want to stand with Trump or whatever, if, the military ballots are accurate. In most of these places where, it was expected, like, for example, in Georgia, it was expected when the military ballots came in, that should have swung the state back to Trump because, the military is overwhelmingly Republican, right? Well, maybe not anymore. And I guess you could say, well, those ballots were tampered with. I don't know. And I don't know what overall Trump's percentage of the military vote was. But needless to say, if Trump declared that he wanted the military to help him stage some kind of a coup, they're not going along with it. And that's, not even getting into, okay, if Trump and the military agree to stage the coup, what does the rest of the American population have to say about it? Without even getting into all that, I just think that it stops at the military. He can't do it. I think if Trump tried to do that, he'd end up dead. I don't think that Trump can trust the people in the White House, let alone the Pentagon. From what I understand, the White House staffers, people around him, in his own house, they're not people to be trusted. And I wouldn't put it past one of his Secret Service guys to off him if he really tried to do this. So I guess for any lefties out there who are worried about this, or I guess also any big Trump supporters who were hoping he would declare martial law or something like Mike Flynn says, it's not going to happen. And Trump has said on the record quite recently that if the Electoral College selects Joe Biden, and that's who the Electoral College picks and Biden gets his 270, that of course Trump would step aside, which is what I would have expected. Trump is saying publicly exactly what I would expect him to say publicly, that he is going to take every legal avenue, exhaust every resource as far as that's concerned, and if he comes up short, then he'll probably try again in 4 years. We are in the counting heads phase to a certain degree, but we're not that kind of counting of heads. The counting of heads is coming in Congress, in the state legislatures and in the courts, saying, okay, who of those people, can Trump expect to be on his side, or, in my opinion, on the side of the truth. So that about sums up my thoughts on the whole Trump coup. I don't even know if you'd call it a rumor or conspiracy. Well, it's a conspiracy theory. That's what I'll call it. The Trump coup conspiracy theory. I don't think that it holds much water. But I don't dismiss people who think like that offhand. If people have valid concerns, just use logic and reason and try and express why you think that they're incorrect. You don't need to call people stupid. You don't need to call them, deranged unless they really are, and they won't listen to you talk or anything like that. But a lot of people are afraid right now of different things, and you can't just write that off, no matter what it is they believe. A lot of different people are worried about things in life for a lot of different reasons. It's a chaotic time. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.